welcome back to another top 10 on the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. I know I've literally done one a couple of days ago. You guys would have seen it out there if you haven't already. But this one, well, I kind of owe these guys one because they come up with the idea from the other top 10. But this one is all about wrestling debuts. And joining me on the show, our good buddies from across the pond. And now I've got your names now. Pretty Deadly, Jesse. Yeah, I've said it.
Yeah.
And Andrew, hang on. Jones. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
How you going, boys?
What's
Good,
up?
good. How you doing?
Good.
It's all good. It is all good. We're closing in on All In. We won't talk about all of that stuff. So I know your prediction shows are coming out this tomorrow, even at the time of recording. So I'll have a watch of that when it comes out, and I'll mirror it up to mine and Dave's, and we'll see who gets the win on that. But top 10, guys. So before we get into the list, Jesse, Andy, Jesse, you go first on this. What makes a debut memorable to you?
There's a lot of factors. The pop from the crowd. I like the surprise aspect. Like when everybody knows somebody's gonna debut, it kind of takes it away from me. When it's just like a surprise, like holy shit, like like what is this guy doing here? Or like, I was gonna give a couple examples there, but we'll go on later on. But yeah, just the overall pop factor, and not just the crowd, the live crowd, but me as well. Like there's been debuts or like people returning that like I literally jump off my couch and I'm like, holy shit, this guy's so just the pop factor.
Andy, with that, obviously, do you include on that? But also, do you think that now with the internet so rife, it does become more difficult for a surprise to be a general surprise to everybody?
Yeah, sometimes they try to like sprinkle a little bit of things in there maybe, and you may hear things backstage, but or backstage on the internet, of course. You might hear rumors and people swirling and journalists putting it out there, but a lot of times the internet can really change it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It does it for me. But let's get into some lists. So we'll start at the bottom and work our way to the top. That's how we do top 10. With about these lists, the beauty of it is it's all subjective. There's no wrong answer just because it ain't on my list or the people at home's list. I've got some wrestlers lists that we'll go through as well. They've got some interesting names on there. But it's all a bit of fun, and I do enjoy doing these shows. I don't do enough of them. We've done quite a lot last year. This is like our first two this year. I need to do some more of these. Number 10 on my list is, it was a debut that it was kind of bittersweet because the career that he went on to have, which is another important thing about debuts, it's the careers that these guys go on to have in wrestling. And perhaps this guy's career in the WWE was very cut short quite quickly. But for the factor of, oh my God, he's in the WWE ring, my number 10 was Sting at Survivor Series. I just felt that, something you'd never thought you'd see in your lifetime because he was so WCW. He made big points about, I don't ever want to go to, he's never sure about WWE. He always thought he was going to get messed around. Maybe he did eventually, who knows? But Sting for me in the WWE was a big surprise.
That's a good start. I actually don't even have that on my list, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. And then like his match with like Triple H at WrestleMania, it was kind of like underwhelming, and what they did with it and the finish, and
exactly.
I agree. Yeah.
But he wanted Undertaker, it wasn't like, why we have a Triple H? Why isn't Undertaker in the WrestleMania match,
And that would have been the match. That was the match everybody wanted to see, in my
Yes,
opinion.
sir.
But Andy, go for it. Who is your 10 and why?
Oh man. 10, number 10 because of the gimmick, and because today it would be taboo, and that would be in 1995 in your house for Gold Dust. Yeah.
Wow, that is one out of the absolute top drawer that I didn't think of.
No, yeah. I'm going to switch it up because it was just so weird and different back then, and all the things we would say and how they would present it, and he went on to like come in, beat Marty Jannetty. He had a win against Bam Bam Bigelow. He went on against Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental title, which he won. And it was a start to something pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. That is such a one from left field that I never.
That's a good one.
That is a great shout. Jesse, your 10 and why?
All right, my number 10 would be from the first ever Monday Night Nitro, Lex Luger debuting.
Yeah.
It would be re-debuting because he had already been in the WCW in
Yeah.
the past when it was under the NWA banner, but
Yeah.
like to ring in the new era of WCW and the Monday Night Wars that were starting to get kicked off, and just the presentation of it when Lex Luger walked out, and Tony Schiavone was like, "What is he doing here? Like, what is this?" Just like the shock factor because Lex Luger had been in WWF for years and he
Yeah.
had just gone off his American, Lex Luger run. And just to see him show up with I'll probably bring up mullets about 15 times today, but like just the amazing mullet and like the Jerry Seinfeld shirt he was wearing and just the shock factor and to bring eyes to that product. I think that was like a really big move because Lex Luger wasn't just a mid card guy. He was presented as a main event guy in WWF. So to be debuting in WCW, I think was a big hit for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think it set the standard as well for what we were becoming to expect from WCW over the next well, until WWE bought them out, really. And it was a really good way. And it was a shock factor as well. As you say, they're in a mall of America, and all of a sudden you're watching it. And for me as a fan over here, because obviously in the UK, it wasn't live. We didn't have the internet back then. So we were kind of like, it was a Friday thing for us. It was like the Friday Night Wars over here because we had it on simultaneous on a Friday at that time. So I was like, what the hell's Lex Luger doing over like what was going on? But it did set the standard. So definitely one on there, one not on my list, but a very good one for sure. That one that I will write down actually, because I'm writing these down because I'm going to show Dave. I know Dave's going to watch this as well. We're going to talk about it on Sunday, and I want to get his list as well. So it's great news.
Awesome.
But number nine, Andy, go ahead, Andrew. Number nine for you.
Number 9, I'm gonna go with AEW, the first Double or Nothing, and that would be John Moxley.
And you got
Yeah,
my number nine as well. That was my
yeah,
number.
Wow.
that was great. Him coming out at the end and putting Kenny Omega on top of that giant poker chip. Yeah, it was just great. Him leaving WWE's Dean Ambrose, and he had went away, and there was rumors of him, and he kind of was in independence, and he released that video vignette, sort of him breaking out of prison or jail, and just the whole lead up, and then the crowd was just insane, and like he was just there in the ring, kind of just taking it in too, and it was a cool moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's what I had written down as well. And it was also, I think AEW needed something to go off that air to get ready for what was to come. And then
Right.
obviously Moxley would then be the flag bearer for AEW. It still probably is to this day in a lot of ways. And as you say, when he come out and he was doing these little arm movements behind as well, and
Yeah.
everything that went into that was kind of what we've come accustomed to with AEW then, and surprises. Now they turn the lights off and they come back on and someone's appeared in the ring. But before then, it was mainly enough. Let's just have someone a bit like what we were saying about Lex Luger, but except he walked through the crowd into the ring, does his
Mhm.
move, bosh, and then we're off to the races with Moxley. And what a great debut that was. As mine was same as yours.
Yeah.
Yes, Jesse, what was your nine?
Yeah, Moxley was an honorable mention of mine.
Yes.
But my number 9 would be the Raw after WrestleMania 14, after Degeneration X was in shambles, and Triple H comes out to the ring and says, "You turn to your blood, you turn to your family, you turn to the click." And it was the debut of X Pac, and
Mm.
X Pac. This was one of the ones I was a kid. I don't even remember how old I was at the time, but I just popped. It was like, oh my God. And he came out and he threw shots. And that was like a true, like defining moment of the Monday Night War for me. Because that's when like the war really started. There was subliminal stuff and WCW was throwing some shots, but WWF kind of stayed into their own pocket until X Pac came out and was just like, Hulk Hogan, you suck, pal. And I think he got a lawsuit out of that, honestly. But
Brother.
it
Yeah.
was just a moment for me. It was one of those defining moments from my childhood that I just won't ever forget. Just I don't think the crowd even really understood the volume of it until he came in and just started making his waves. But yeah, X Pac's debut after WrestleMania 14 was huge for me as a child.
Yeah, it was great. It was, and you said it kind of set that tone, didn't it, of what was to come, and that's when it kind of kicked it up. Everything kicked up a notch from there, didn't it? And WWE sort of finally started taking that grasp where WCW were kind of kicking its ass for so long, and they had the whole DX, Tyson, Austin, and then the next phase, as we saw, the chapter or innings, as Paul Heyman says now, was that next big thing, and that would be the rebirth of DX with the new
Yeah.
family members in its place. Very,
And then
very.
And then later that night, the New Age Outlaws joined in the cage match against Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie. So it was just like you said, a new forming of DX.
A new format and a very good one to set the
Yeah.
tone for what was a long list or long months and years of a lot of parodies and funny vignettes and God knows what else. But that was really good fun watching DX on that time. Number 8, Jesse, we're going to start with you now. We've just ended with you, but you're number 8.
Boy, giving me a lot of my 15 minutes of fame here. My number 8 would be the debut of the Exalted One, Brody Lee in AEW.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people knew that he was going, and there was kind of like an understanding of like what was going on, on the dirt sheets and on the IWC and stuff. But Brody Lee, when he came out and just laid roughshod and just took everybody out, and it took the Dark Order from being like this parody, goofy ass group to being like legitimate until they turned into a parody group 6 weeks later with Brody Lee. But yeah, just seeing him come out and kind of just almost like you guys said about Jon Moxley, just kind of strip himself of the chains of the WWE machine and kind of just be his own character was just very huge, a big moment for me.
Yeah, it kind of, with him, it kind of showed a bit more about what he can actually do. I always felt in the WWE that you were always going to be behind Bray Wyatt, weren't you? When you're in that faction, he was the main one of the group, and maybe Harper would have been Brody Lee would have been a second behind him, and Rowan a third, and obviously with Strowman when he come later. So it was Brody's time to shine, and unfortunately, it got taken away too quickly for us to see it. And I remember that match with Cody Rhodes when he absolutely decimated him on the Dynamite, when it really showed what it was. And it's just a shame that we never got to see any more, much more of it after that, unfortunately. But Andrew, you're number 8.
Yeah. So he originally debuted in like 1987, I believe, in Survivor Series, but we wouldn't know him then until later on from ECW until he showed up in WWE, and that would be Rob Van Dam.
Yeah.
And growing up, like we watched WWF, WWE, and WCW somewhat, and ECW was kind of harder to get our hands on because of how it was, and RVD was just kind of taboo. And like when he showed up and he did his move sets, he threw the chair up and kicked it in your face, and he did all like that crazy hardcore extreme stuff, and he brought that to WWE. It was just exciting and awesome, and I loved it. And like that match against Jeff Hardy at Invasion with the hardcore match, and then that triple threat match with him against Stone Cold and Kurt Angle, and then to go on with the whole Survivor Series Invasion angle. So cool.
He was he brought an innovative change to WWE, didn't he? With the way that he would do his stuff, split-legged moonsaults, Van Daminator. You'd seen it all in ECW, but it was new to the WWE audience. They had the hardcore elements like chair shots and stuff like that. But RVD, when he come in, just took that to that new level, to what we see now of like the Jeff Hardys and maybe now it's more so the Darby Allins tries to kill himself every week on telly, literally. But RVD was the innovator of that hardcore ECW style within the WWE, and then it's kind of people have cottoned on from there. But Van Dam was a very good choice. I had his Royal Rumble down as the one I put down. Remember when he returned at I think it was 02 Royal Rumble? I can't remember the year. I remember him being in the Royal Rumble. He'd come back at Rumble. I'd had that down as an honorable mention, but I did love RVD. Speaking of Royal Rumbles and debuts, that brings me to my 8. It's quite low down in the grander scheme of things, because I think when you listen to some of mine and some of my reasons for it, it's some of my reasons for it, how it changed the face of the business or how things changed. This one was a real surprise because it was kind of spoken about beforehand. They'd done a great work on the WWE camera thing of not showing you who it was. You just heard the crowd pop when it was, and that was AJ Styles when he come in
Oh,
at the Royal Rumble. I'd seen that, obviously, you'd seen him in TNA and doing everything that he was doing. And there was always this, I think he'd had a match on Velocity once beforehand, and we'd seen all of that. And you'd think it'd be one of those ones that the ones that got away, so to speak. You never thought as it was going on because he was getting older, and you're like, is it ever going to
mhm.
happen? And if it's going to happen, it's going to have to be now, kind of thing. And it finally did. And I think he's one of those guys that with the TNA guys, and this was way before their partnership with TNA, they haven't really brought anyone in from TNA and absolutely ruined them. I don't think anyway. Maybe there's a few that I've missed out on. But he was one of the main ones. Him and Joe were the ones I was really interested to see. And I was so glad when that time happened, when the buzzer hit, and as I said, the camera nicely turned pound away from the so you couldn't see the Tron until he walked out. But really good one for me. And he debuted against Roman Reigns, who is now obviously the big dog. So what better way to debut at a Royal Rumble? But
Yeah, I have that
Exciting.
later up on my list, and
Yeah.
I'll give you my reasons later.
yeah, give you reasons later for sure. But Jesse, you're number 8 or 7, or was it 8? Yeah,
7. I'm on 7.
Sorry,
7.
yeah, I've missed 7.
That's all right. Hey, I'm not going to hold it against you. My number 7 would be at the Survivor Series. We had the debut of during the $1 Million Man group, The Undertaker.
Yeah.
And when this happened, I wasn't even old enough to really remember or appreciate it when it happened, but going back and looking at the impact, like you said, changing the face of the industry. I mean, The Undertaker, people that don't even know pro wrestling know who The Undertaker is, and he's that iconic of a character. And he came out and literally children crying in the front row, scared. Like, what a way to like get his gimmick over just by walking out to the ring with Brother Love. And you know, I'm sure he found his niche a little bit better with Paul Bearer down the line. But yeah, just a great character. I don't think anybody else could have been slotted into that gimmick and worked. I think Mark Calloway just kind of really made that work. And wow, what a career. You know, what a career he had. I mean, debuted at, I believe it was the 1990 Survivor Series, and then the 91 Survivor Series is when he beat Hulk Hogan for the championship. Like, with a little help from Ric Flair and a broken neck on Hulk Hogan. But, you know, so, but yeah, just an iconic character. One of the faces of the WWF. I wouldn't put him on my wrestling Mount Rushmore, but certainly my WWF Mount Rushmore.
Interesting. I've got it higher up the list, and I'll explain the reasons why in a minute. But yeah, that's definitely on your Mount Rushmore.
My wrestling Mount Rushmore. Yeah. Oh, I mean, we're going back 50, 60 years. I mean, there's a lot of people put people in Mount Rushmore for the last 20 years. You know, there's people that transcended the business and pushed the business forward, I think, but it's all subjective.
That's hard. That's hard. Yeah, like a Mount Rushmore, you need like 20 peaks on that.
Yeah,
that mountain. You know, they need to add some more faces.
You need a week to climb it, wouldn't you? That's realistically. If you go on there, but at 7, please, Andrew.
Yes, I'm gonna go with. Can you dig it, sucker? Yeah, when he came over from WCW, showed up in WWE, swagged out, Booker T. 2001 King of the Ring, showed up and messed up Stone Cold Steve Austin, dropped him right on the table, hurt him, messed up his back or his neck again or something, and earned some good respect back in the locker room. But I really popped for Booker T when he came over there and came and faced The Rock and all that, and brought his WCW world championship over, and so it could continue there in WWE. Yeah, just so great. Loved it.
It was great because also it was one of those ones where we sort of touched on it before, where WWE made a great job of ruining WCW wrestlers' careers, for want of a better phrase. And he was one of the sticking points and one they didn't ruin. And it may have taken him a lot longer. I mean, there was the WrestleMania 19, I think, when he should have beat Triple H and he didn't, when he was so hot. when we was talking about it on the SummerSlam review, when we were saying it's kind of like now or never for certain wrestlers, and Booker T seemed to like it was now or never then, but he won it years later, and it was all okay. Everything was forgiven. King Booker was
King
there.
Booker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
King Booker was alive, and the belt come to him eventually. But yeah, he was a great one of those ones with WWE. I'm glad made the jump, and I'm also glad that the success happened for him in WWE. Unlike other heavyweight champions that went over there, didn't quite cut the mustard. Bill Goldberg.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Goldberg's not on my list, so it's
No. No.
my seven. So I'm going to go next with my next two. So I'm going to end with seven. And I'm going to start with six because they didn't come in together into WCW, but they got together in WCW. And we're talking about how business transcended and how
Mhm.
everything started the new war, or they started everything together. Nothing would not have happened without Kevin Nash and Scott Hall jumping ship to WCW. So it's Nash 7, Hall 6 on my list. And the reason, well, I mean, obviously I've just mentioned it, but I remember Scott Hall. You're watching Nitro. This is days before, years before you had idiots like Meltzer and spoiling shit for you. So before you even had the internet, where you could, people were getting in, had their sources and stuff or whatever. And I remember watching Nitro, and I was sitting. Was like, what is Scott Hall? We scared about Lex Luger just walking out at the start, and then when he's coming through the crowd and he jumped the barricade, and you're like, what? And I saw him literally last week on Raw as Razor Ramon. Why is he now over here? And then it was like he's obviously you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And then he had another big surprise, and that big surprise turned into be Big Sexy, and and I'm sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, he's literally just had a match with Bret Hart where he got pulled under the ring by the Undertaker not too long ago, and now he's walking out on WCW TV. They had that, and then there was an element of realism as well. I think they had like I remember, I think it was Nash was doing an interview, and he was saying how it was the time when they come into the ring with baseball bats, and they had near enough the whole of the WCW roster out, and one of the baseball bats wasn't gimmicked, and he hit the bat against the stairs, and it made this sort of gunshot noise, and it made people believe that, hang on a minute, they actually are invading from the WWE. And it was like, this was incredible. For me, those two hit, well, I think the five above that are there on merit, hopefully, maybe. We'll have to see. But those two, for me, are the ones that transcended my teenage years anyway, into watching wrestling, from this cartoonish to then this outlandish stuff that we would see on our screens going forward. So Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, 6 and 7 on my list. But we get to 6 now. Andy, who's your 6?
Yes. Well, thank God they had that cattle prod too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, they were next for me too. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to take them because I had them together as like the outsiders, even though they didn't debut technically on the same night. And I'm going to take them, and I'm going to go with the NWO coming to No Way Out.
Yes.
With Hulk Hogan and showing up, because I was just huge, like with The Rock and with Stone Cold, and then them showing up on the company, of course, and like they took that truck and just slammed it right in the Rock's limo or car or whatever it was, and like that was crazy watching them. Like I think it was on SmackDown on the UPN back in the day, like, and like trying to get the channel to come in and pop so hard for it, and like that match that would later come on with Hulk and Rock at WrestleMania was huge. One of the greatest pops of like an in-ring match at that time of all time, maybe. So yeah, it was awesome growing up watching that. And
I had him on my list.
Unforgettable.
I had him I had that on my list up until this morning.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the next guy that I'm going to talk about took over, but we can't get to that yet because we're not on to the 5. Right. Jesse, your 6.
Yeah, my 6, it was back in 1999, and we had these little teases leading up to it with a timer that said countdown to the millennium.
Yeah.
And it was just, everybody was just wondering what the hell it was. And The Rock was out cutting a promo in the ring, and all of a sudden the countdown to the millennium came on the screen, and it ended up being none other than Y2J Chris Jericho. and not for his initial debut because The Rock sort of buried him in that opening kind of promo. the Rock kind of ripped him a new asshole. But what that did for Chris Jericho in his career, he was very stagnant in WCW, even though he was getting over. I don't think the powers that be wanted him to be over, so he came over to WWF. I mean, you're talking about becoming the first ever unified world champion, defeating The Rock and Stone Cold in the same night, going on to being a multi-time world champion, multi-time tag team champion, intercontinental champion, then going over to AEW, being the first ever AEW champion. And I don't think any of that would have happened if it wasn't for his debut in WWF and him just taking the ball and rolling with it.
Quite interesting, because sometimes if you look at promos that end people, you look at like Cena when he absolutely decimated Austin Theory. I know it wasn't his debut, but he's never really recovered from that. So not only was the debut great, he got absolutely, as you say, got a new arsehole ripped by The Rock on the same night. But on top of that, he then, the following week, he kind of elevated himself. Did he not do one on like Undertaker and Big Show or something like that the following week or a week or two later? And I think that kind of, not say saved him, but because of the fact that they were rolling with it and he was off to the races with this new gimmick or this new debut of Jericho. It was kind of one of those very few people that can take a ripping on the mic, but then next week come out and be 4 times as better than what he was the week before. So he did survive. He did survive that for sure. But we're getting into top 5 territory. These are 5 big ones. By the way, Jericho is higher up my list, so I'm saving.
Yeah, same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a little bit for that. He's very high on my list, up on my list. But let's go to the top 5. Andy, what's your 5?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Royal Rumble 2000 in Madison Square Garden. First Kurt Angle, and that would be Red Hook Brooklyn's very own Taz showing up, and crowd went crazy. It's in New York City, comes out the old tunnel, like Brooklyn, they're going to go crazy. New York City, again, they're going to go crazy, and like the lead up was crazy. People thought it was coming from ECW, like put Kurt Angle in the Taz mission and passed him, tapped him out, and all that. Just so great. Like, yeah, crowd was crazy. Yeah, and Taz to go on, like we all love like the theme song and wanted to do all that stuff growing up wrestling. Yeah,
it's as Kurt Angle said, he put him in a choke.
Yeah.
I remember right. It's one of those big ones from ECW, one of those big movers. Because obviously, at those times, you had like Mike Awesome going to WCW. You had a lot of other things happening, but I don't think an ECW debut really resonated as much as Taz. I don't know. Maybe RVD with an outsider there, but even Dreamer back in the day when Dreamer moved and stuff, and even when Hack debuted on WCW, it was never. They never caught that kind of pop. Maybe right location, right person, right time for WWE.
Yeah.
Put it in New York, where he's from. So even the casual fan in New York's going to know who Taz is just by, for the fact he's from there. I think they hit every now on the head on that.
Yeah, Kurt Angle really helped him too, like on the mic before he came out and healed it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I remember afterwards, like, because Kurt Angle was with Edge and Christian and him watching the footage back and forth and like, technically I didn't tap out. So technically I didn't lose.
Oh, yeah.
That was Kurt Angle's first loss in the WWF, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Shoo.
Yeah, he was undefeated up until that point.
That's big.
Yeah, and what a way, again, we talk about how impactful debuts. You're the first man to beat Kurt Angle in a WWE ring, and with the career that Kurt Angle had, he's never going to be taken that away from Taz either from that. So an amazing start. Jesse, you're 5.
My number 5. I'm just gonna my number 5, and then this is kind of like a 3-in-1, but I'll focus on the 1.
Yeah.
Is on Monday Night Raw, Triple H was looking for an opponent. He wanted to face Mankind. Couldn't face Mankind. Mankind wasn't ready. Dude Love wasn't sinister enough, but we did get the debut of Cactus Jack in the WWF. And that little promo vignette thing they had on the screen of all 3 faces of Foley sitting together and talking before the match and just leading to his music and him throwing the trash can out of the curtain and coming out and having that hardcore match with Triple H that's what they call, what the IWC calls chef's kiss for me. That was just so cool. It's so innovative. But you have to look back at, like, I have honorable mentions, Mankind debuting in the WWF and coming after The Undertaker, and then Dude Love debuting in the WWF to be Stone Cold's tag team partner to win the tag team titles with them. All three faces of Foley had like memorable debuts in the WWF. And but that one with the Cactus Jack, I mean, it was just so, it led on to his tag team run with Chainsaw Charlie, who was Terry Funk, and just a beautiful way to kind of tie all that together and bring a gimmick that people probably didn't think would ever work in WWF, and he made it work in the WWF.
He made 3 gimmicks work in the WWF, which really shouldn't have worked, especially Dude Love, for Christ's sake. I mean, that was magical. He's very one that had 3 separate debuts. Like, I mean, obviously you've had debuts of same characters debuting and reinventing themselves. Jericho did plenty of times, but Foley to have 3 kind of debuts quite in quick succession. It wasn't as if, like, it was Mankind for 4 years and then he was quite quick to change up. And although we already knew Cactus Jack existed, if you watched WCW or ECW, you knew about Cactus Jack, but the Dude Love one was way out of left field. It's the total opposite of Foley. So again, it shows how good of a guy he is, that he can work different characters, and it kind of, he was like a unique guy in WWE. He could work so many different hats. A good Foley. That one itself was a very impressive one for me. Mankind was the one that really, I remember the Boiler Room Brawl.
Oh God, yeah, so good.
But I think that also set the thing with Foley, that how much of pain he could take in WWE. Because I know we went on with the Hell in the Cells and all of that sort of stuff. But you started it, that's where it kind of started to get a bit more edgier in ring. Not necessarily the storylines, but the in-ring product started changing around that time. And it was that match for me that I always remember that kick-started a lot of stuff going forward. And then obviously, as you say, Cactus Jack is the crazy one of the, there could be a crazy one of those 3, but yeah, it's going to be him, Cactus Jack. That was an incredible moment. I remember that on the Raw. I remember Triple H's face as well, which was a picture when Cactus come out. Speaking of face being pictures, my 5 is it was one that was gonna happen. It was literally plastered everywhere. It was gonna happen. It was just a case of when were they going to bring this man out on AEW, and now CM Punk. Yeah. But for me, it was like, okay, he's not. I never thought we would see him again. I don't know why. I kind of thought he'd be done with wrestling, and maybe in the hindsight, but he wish he was after everything that happened in that company. But obviously, we knew it was going to happen. It was touted. Even when Rampage started with the red lights flashing, and there was still a little bit, because I mean the crowd pop was insane. It was in Chicago. AEW could draw a crowd then, and it was a lot more. Everything about the return of CM Punk was great. I was a big CM Punk fan. Still got his shine shirt where I met him. As I was always hoping one day that Punk would be back in wrestling, and I never thought we'd see this. But what happened at Survivor Series a year or 2 later, back in WWE. But Punk for me returning was just memorable. They done it perfectly. They had it straight away, because you knew if you didn't in Chicago and they was expecting him, it would be all night. You'd have CM Punk chants until we come out. So they've done it right. They got him out first. He'd done his promo, said he was back, and then you could enjoy the rest of the show knowing Punk was all. So I think everything about it was right. How they done it was right. Him coming back was right. What he'd done in the ring, the promo, he was back in professional wrestling, because he left that longer than when he left WWE. He left that when he left Ring of Honor. Everything about it was so well executed and done. It's just a shame that the career in AEW didn't exactly go to plan for Punk. But in terms of where we are on a list, that would be very high on my list. I'm going to go 4. My one's slightly weird. I'm going to get my one out of the way, my 4, because it's not a wrestler as such. Okay. My 4 was one of the times after the Attitude Era where I was completely blown away by somebody turning up on another programming. That was Eric Bischoff. Yep. When he turned up on Raw after everything had happened, WCW had gone to shit, WWE had bought them. The last person I would ever have thought of seeing on WWE TV would have been Eric Bischoff. He's a good friend of the show. We've had him on many times. We've had some great chats of him. But for me, that was just, I remember sitting there going, what I remember he walked backstage and Booker T was like, "Tell me I didn't see that." You know, and I just remember sitting there in disbelief. I never thought that after everything, considering he tried to put Vince out of business, I suppose sometimes it's better the devil you know than the devil you worked with, I suppose, or the devil you've competed against.
Right.
Sometimes your own worst enemy is your best friend, or something along those lines. I can't remember the saying, but for
Yeah.
me, that was just pure shock factor. And I hadn't seen it in so long in wrestling that when he walked out as a general manager of Raw, just blew me away in WWE. But yeah, that was my 4, Jesse. What's yours?
Oh, I didn't know you were gonna come to me so quick. So my number 4 is it was one that was it was one that was mentioned earlier. Royal Rumble 2016, AJ Styles
Yes.
debuting. This for me, and I I was a big fan of AJ Styles and TNA. Um, I got to meet AJ Styles a couple times and like had kind of like a I felt like he was my best friend because I met him twice backstage, But uh, he had left TNA, he went to Japan, did his stuff with the Bullet Club. And there was a lot of spattering on the internet and rumors and everything else. And it got to the Royal Rumble. And I think the thing was I pretty sure I knew he was going to debut, but I didn't think it was going to be number 3.
Yeah.
So like the first 2 competitors came out. It was number 4, I believe. But it was early on in the Rumble, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And like you said, the timer went off, this music plays, like who the hell's music is this? You heard the crowd pop. And then when it just showed him with his head down with the hood up, I said, here we fucking go. I said, here we go. And AJ Styles came in and he just took WWE by storm when it was really kind of a sinking ship as far as popularity and established stars really drawing crowds and stuff like that. I mean, he took on John Cena, later on. He took the armband and put it around his head, and he was the face that runs the place. And to go on to being in the final match of the Undertaker's career, like everything this guy did in WWE kind of meant something for a long time. Not maybe in the last few years, he's kind of fallen into obscurity a little bit. I mean, he had a couple title matches, but nobody thought he was going to win. But for a few years, it was like everything AJ Styles was doing was gold, and he couldn't miss. And when a lot of these wrestlers were kind of John Cena style with the 5 moves of doom and whatever, he was just always bringing something new and innovative to every match he was in. And it all started at the Royal Rumble, where he came in and stole the show at the Rumble. I mean, I don't think anybody outperformed him in that Rumble.
No. Do you wish that we would have got the HBK Styles match that was rumored?
Some people say it's better to love and lost than never loved at all. And I say sometimes it's better to have never loved at all, because everybody wanted the Brothers of Destruction against DX. And look what happened when that happened. We had Kane's mask falling off, and, on paper, of course, I mean, I could sit here and fantasize about how great of a match that would be, but no pun intended, it might have had a styles clash there. And
younger HBK obviously would have been. Yeah. AJ Styles was so polished when he came right in too. Like,
yeah, he certainly was. I would like to have seen it. Just, I don't know, maybe. I would like to have loved. Instead of lost and never seen it, but that's just my opinion. Go on, Andy, your go. Where you go?
Yeah. So it wasn't his match, but it was at In Your House '97, Hell in a Cell. The big red machine popped out of the bottom of the ring, and that was Kane for the Undertaker versus HBK to, of course, show up and take out the Undertaker. And Jesse talked about X-Pac, and how about X-Pac and Kane and their tag team run and all that? Like, Kane's had some great moments from then. Of course, his whole rivalry with the Undertaker and being his brother, and Paul Bearer turning, and Kane was just so awesome with the lights and the fire, and that pop was crazy. Nobody really knew who it was, and it really worked for him too, right? There's not very many people it would have worked for, right? Or like the original gimmick of what it was supposed to be or what they had planned. What it turned out to be was great. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. He's on my list. You've actually taken my number 1.
Okay.
Kane for me was just everything about it, because there was always the whole thing in the back with Paul Beary's "Your brother's alive." You know, brother,
Right.
what are you talking about, brother? And then obviously Taker's just beating, just about to kill Michaels. He's just, I think he even fell off the cell at one point, just halfway off the cell to the table. Had him
Yep.
bloodied and bad. Was going to hit. I think he signaled for the tombstone, and then the lights go out, and then eerie music plays. The pyro goes off. He's walking down the ring, and remember Vince McMahon's like, "That's gonna be Kane," and
Yeah.
it was like, and but it's someone to pull it off as well, because obviously those are people
Yeah.
that know wrestling. Was like, he was Isaac Yankem, DDS, he was a
Right.
couple of other gimmicks beforehand, but someone that could pull off the mannerisms. Because you remember when Kane, I think it was, no pun intended, I think it was like Festus, wasn't it? That was the old May 19th Kane. Looked like Kane had had a bit of liposuction when he came out. It was like half the
Oh,
size of him, couldn't. But the mannerisms that Kane had sort of mimicked off of the Undertaker. Remember, there was an old video that I think someone had released on Twitter of Kane in training to be Kane, like Glenn Jacobs,
yes.
mimicking the sit up and everything else. And it was just like someone that could do all that and look so much like the Undertaker in many ways, with the hair and all of that, and the scariness of that gimmick at the time was
Like
just,
Michael Myers, yeah,
yeah,
esque,
literally
and all, yeah, horror esque, and
to put
yeah,
all
and then
that,
like the original, like what he was supposed to wear, and then
yeah,
for
the
his
cape,
attire, and
yeah,
then yeah, the cape and what it turned out to be. It just, it was scary too. And Jesse talked about it at other times, like having nightmares as a kid
yeah.
about Kane coming in his bedroom, like or whatever, like
Pause.
yeah,
Pause.
pause.
That was an
Yeah,
incredible debut for me, but he's on my list higher up. I'll talk more about it after that.
yeah.
But what about your three, Andrew? Who's your three?
Three goes right with it, and that would be 1990 Survivor Series with the Million Dollar Man, The Undertaker.
Same as
Like,
me.
yeah, seeing the kids in the crowd and stuff like that, and like I just grew up like my dad made me watch like all types of horror movies and everything, and nobody in the WWE quite spoke to me yet. Hulk Hogan was always my favorite. Then, I don't remember Undertaker debuting, of course. I would have been 2 years old, but probably in like 94 or whatever when I started watching everything, and it just spoke to me, the supernatural, the Undertaker part of it. And then when, seeing Paul Bearer and all that, and then going back and watching the debut, and yeah, his attire, everything, just everything he did, supernatural. Loved it.
Yeah, he's third on my list, and I remember his debut. I do remember it. I am old enough
Yeah.
to remember the was I 86, I think, at the time. I can't remember the exact words. I remember Heenan going, "Look at the ham hocks on this guy."
Yes. Yeah.
Like, on his arm. It's just like it was Wicks. I think it was like a gimmick that was never. I don't know if it was ever meant to go
Yeah.
as long as it did or last as long as it did. And this is where you credit him, the under Mark Calloway and everyone behind it. I know that he said that, he wanted to, when it was time to get rid of the under, he'd come as the American Badass, and then he was,
Hmm.
Big Evil, and then he'd come back full circle at
Hmm.
WrestleMania 20. But I don't know if that gimmick was ever meant to have gone on as long as it did, and it lasted
True.
as long as it did. And everything that he'd done in wrestling was just incredible. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's not the debut as such, it's the career that supersedes the debut. But without that debut, you don't get what
Right.
we got, which was
Absolutely.
Taker. And for me, he's free for that reason. The debut, I just remember looking at him going, "What the fuck is it?" Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like 7 foot, near a 7 foot dude, and as Heenan says, ham hock arms, and impervious. I've never seen someone take a punch and just stand there.
Hmm.
Just glance his head, and then it was all of that. And then you said there's the scariness. The kids were shitting themselves in the
Yeah.
crowd about this guy coming out, and he's still got one of the best entrances as well ever,
Hmm.
with the whole performance that goes around.
Yeah, and everything with the urn and everything back
Yeah.
then was just
Oh,
so
yeah.
mysterious
Held
and
it
awesome,
up.
and smoke. Yeah, it's just
Yeah, everything about it was amazing.
Yeah.
So that was my three as well. So Jesse, it's now your three. Who's yours?
I guess gotta say I'm feeling left out. Y'all are matching up numbers, and I'm over here all by myself. I'm calling out fucking X-Pac coming on and shit. And you
Oh,
guys
come on.
matching, you know what I mean? So, but no, my number three was Bad Blood '97 Kane.
Yeah.
like Andy had said, like me growing up, I was scared to like shitless of Kane. To quote Paul Heyman from WrestleMania X7, Kane scares the hell out of me, and I am a fearless man, you know. But everything about it, you know, like you said, Vince McMahon's call when he came out, the timing of the lights going out, Undertaker calling for the tombstone, him ripping the door off the hinges to come into the Hell in a Cell to come in and give Undertaker a tombstone. It's like, wait, someone's giving Undertaker the tombstone, you know, which led to like that amazing rivalry that you know, went to Royal Rumble when Kane, during the casket match with Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, Kane put Undertaker in the casket and set it on fire, and all the shit with their dead parents, and it's a little bit too far, but you know what I mean. But like the whole build up, you just believed. I mean, you believed that's the only guy that could match Undertaker, besides Giant Gonzalez, but we don't talk about him. But he was one of my honorable mentions, but I deleted it. But but yeah, everything about Kane was just picture perfect, well done. Like I said, scared me, made me believe, and the career that he went on to have, and riding the coattails of being the Undertaker's brother, but still being able to like kind of polish his own like foot, what do they call it? Tread his own path and have his own Hall of Fame career in its own right, you know.
Yeah, because he still had like some of the same gimmick and some of the same moves, but he was still able to prosper and do, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a little Easter egg there. Wasn't Undertaker originally supposed to be Kane the Undertaker?
Yeah.
I believe that was originally supposed to be his name when he debuted, Kane the Undertaker. So that was kind of a cool little Easter egg for hardcore fans.
Exactly. I think remember the Undertaker saying, well, the other thing about the Undertaker before Kane was that he always used to thought he was going to be Eggman at Survivor Series, because he debuted at the same time that I think it was Terry Taylor come out of the egg of the rooster.
Oh, the Gobbledygooker?
Gobbledygooker.
Yeah.
That's the guy. Yeah.
I thought that was one of the Guerreros. I thought that was
I don't know. It could have been anyone.
Hector Guerrero, I thought.
But, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. It was Hector. Yes, he was the guy. An Undertaker thought he was going to be him when he did. I remember him saying, "I've seen it before." But yeah, Kane was great. I'll get to my bit of Kane. He's my number one. My number two has already been said as well. It was with the debut of Jericho on Raw. We had the Millennium, as you mentioned, all the Millennium Countdown. This is again time before there was a couple of signs in the crowd that said Jericho. I remember the one saying Raw is Jericho, the Millennium Man, Chris Jericho, and all of that sort of stuff. So there was obviously enough rumors around, but living in England, we didn't get that stuff. So it was cool. I mean, I remember sort of seeing it go, oh, this guy was on WCW, he wasn't doing a lot, but they must be making a big deal out of him for him to come out against The Rock. If you're debuting and you're coming out against The Rock or Austin, they obviously see something in you. In the WWE, and you remember The Rock, they said, ripped him a new art. Doesn't matter who you are, and you Rudy Poo Candy ass, and all the stuff that The Rock used to say. I think he took the piss out of his hair. I think, if I remember rightly, because he had some really weird hair when he debuted. If I remember rightly, that little bit at the top, I think it was. But someone that's obviously he took that, and I kind of already said it that he took that sort of stuff, but he went on. I think that's it. I think the following week, Undertaker and Big Show, I think it was the next one, and then he said the first undisputed champion. And then when the time was right, when he thought the time was right, it was a reinvention. It was a Save Us Y2J. And then we had the one that come out when he didn't talk, when he re-debuted the third time. I think he come out and he didn't talk. And we had the Best in the World. And obviously now in AEW, I'm not a big fan of the stuff that he's done. And initially I was, but I felt like Dave made a great point. I don't mean to shit on him because he's my number two on my list. But Dave made a point of saying that Chris Jericho was in AEW was everything that he hated in WCW, which was people that were the older guys trying to stay on top and bits and pieces like that. Nowadays, not so much. The learning tree I've got to like because it's stupid.
Hey guys,
goofy, but it's not main event, and it's not where it's not positioning himself high up the card. It's quite low down on a show, so it's not stupid. And we've got people like Brian Keith. I've always been a fan of Big Bill or Cass, whatever you want to call him. But for me, Jericho's debut was again greatly done. It was done over a period of months or a month or so when the clock started to now, and the career that the guys had, constantly reinventing himself, and he was a great wrestler. Again, maybe not so much now. He's getting a bit older, but everything about he's had a 30-year career in wrestling, so he deserves to be my number 2 on there. We all know who 1 is, but we'll get into that. But Andy, who's your 2?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. August 9th, 1999. Raw is Jericho. Yeah. The timer, the countdown, we all heard it might happen, and like just always would reinvent and do that move of him doing the thing and turning around, and the music, some people hated it, and the video package. I loved it. I popped so much for it. Like I was so happy Chris Jericho was there. And like I said, the Rock ripped him, but he was just so good, and every on the mic, in the ring, and everything he did, it didn't matter. He was still able to go and have a great career. I mean, when he went with the Intercontinental title, that match against Chris Benoit, X-Pac, Eddie Guerrero, that match was just insane. And then to go on to AEW, like he's like the king of reinventing himself.
Yeah.
Like he's got the formula. He knows what to do, love it or hate it.
Yeah, indeed. At that. And now you threw your hands up, Jesse, when Andy agreed to me at 2. What have you got at 2?
Not what you guys had. I have Scott Hall debuting on Monday Nitro.
Yeah.
And the reasoning behind this is what I talked about at the beginning, the pop and the shock factor of it. And like you had mentioned earlier, it just rang in this whole new. If the Lex Luger appearing on the first Nitro was big as far as, oh my God, anything can happen in WCW, this just took it over the top. And like you said, people were just kind of blurring the lines. Wait a minute, isn't he a WWF guy? And you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And I go where I want, when I want, and everything about that rang in. Like you said, Kevin Nash coming in later, and then Hulk Hogan being the third man and starting the NWO, the New World Organization, brother. And, which began the 83 weeks that Eric Bischoff still holds near and dear to his heart of beating WWF in the ratings. And it all kicked off. I don't think any of that would have been as meaningful or as impactful if Scott Hall was Razor Ramon in WWF, obviously, and was never really a main eventer. He was high mid card, but never really main eventer. I think he had a heavyweight match against Bret Hart when he was a heel, but never really crossed that threshold. No. And Scott Hall's also one of my top 3 probably wrestlers to never win a world heavyweight title.
There's another top 10 right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I could wrap those out for you right now. But yeah, Scott Hall, the debut of it, he still kind of had like the Razor Ramon gimmick, but he shedded the name and just was kind of just meshed it with his own kind of style. And I mean, it's like I said, as far as ushering the new era, and I don't think WWF, the Attitude Era, would have came about if it wasn't for WCW pushing the envelope as much as they did, and it started with Scott Hall.
Certainly did. Again, and what transcended after that was amazing stuff. It is number 1 time. I'm going to go first because I'd already mentioned it. Kane being my number 1. I don't think storyline. I think it had everything. Storyline. It had not a shock factor as such of who it was because we didn't really know who he was, but it was the look, the eerie music, the timing in which the debut, everything was set up for what basically was going to be Undertaker's brother. I remember the Undertaker's face even. He was like looking and saying, is that you? Is that him? And he went so long without even laying a finger on his brother. It took him I think it was months before he actually said, no, I'm not, you pushed me to that point. But everything about Kane was perfect. The whole, as we said, Michael Myers, the walk, even as much as the walk and the thing with the arm and the whole, I'm going to do the pyro like this and it's going to be fire because I'm coming from hell instead of smoke. And like the Undertaker, I know the Undertaker went through a phase when he had fire and he had everything else, but originally it was just smoke and thunder that the Undertaker had. Kane had everything about it. Did I agree with the mask going off? Not initially. I felt that's what
Yeah.
kept Kane from being Kane. He did reinvent himself quite nicely when he did. It was a more psychotic Kane because he realized that all these burns were just make believe. They didn't. He didn't really have the burns that he said he had because it was all in his head kind of thing. But he had the eye thing, and again, someone that reinvented himself. And then then he had a different variation of the mask, didn't he? Before the mask went off, he had the little half mask, didn't he? The Batman style
Yeah.
mask. And I think the worst thing they done was when they gave him a voice. I didn't mind
Yeah.
it so much when he had that thing next to him. It was like, "My name is Kane." I didn't mind it too much when he had that. But when he started talking properly, kind of until with the mask come off, then it was fine for him to have the voice. I felt like the whole thing was nice without it because he had the mouthpiece. He had Paul Bearer for as ever long as he had, and then you said he had the thing with X Park and everything else that went. And he kind of restarted the feud with the Undertaker. Went off many years. Remember him burying him alive to end the American Badass to start the return of the short-haired version of the Undertaker that was at WrestleMania 20. And then later on, he put him in a vegetated state. If you go back to the whole Rey Mysterio thing, and it had that part, and then that match was just throwaway. But Kane himself, the career that he had, not too sure on his views politically, but we're not a political program, so we don't have to worry about it. But Kane in himself, brilliant, everything done, and that's why he's my number one. But Andrew, who is your numero uno?
Oh yeah. So it was AEW, and
Ooh.
yeah, surprise. Uh, the week before, Darby Allin was cutting a video promo vignette, and he said, "Next week, I'll be there in Rampage, and you better show up, even if you're the best in the world." And throughout the time on Instagram and social media, we got little glimpses and hints, and it would be dubbed the greatest secret that everybody knew, but it was August 20th, 2021, sold out United Center, the second episode of Rampage. And when that came off and that crowd went crazy, you had grown men crying in the crowd. Like, what a pop. Like, most emotional I ever felt for some wrestler coming out and hearing probably the loudest thing I've ever heard on TV watching. I still think to this day, and that's CM Punk. And it was so great. The things he said, like he said everything so perfectly planned. Everything was so well done. And then Darby Allin was probably my favorite wrestler at that time too. And then to have him sitting up in the rafters with Sting and to lead to that Punk's first match against him back there at the United Center or whatever in Chicago, all time number one, baby, best in the world, CM Punk.
Can't
Yeah.
argue with that at all. Jesse, who's your
Yeah.
one?
Who are my number ones?
Mm.
And I'm surprised this hasn't been brought up yet. I was assuming that it was going to be, but I'm going back to Survivor Series 2012. There was a triple threat match for the World Heavyweight title. It was CM Punk against John Cena against Ryback, and we had the debut of the Shield.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Shield came out and they laid waste to Ryback. Nobody knew. I mean, because NXT, FCW, then NXT, like wasn't really a household name thing back then. You could find it on the internet and stuff, but it was more like straight up developmental back then. So for these three guys to be paired together and come out and just lay waste, and everybody was wondering, are they helping CM Punk? What are they here for? And nobody really knew, but what people did know is they left their mark in that debut. And not only did they do that, they had a long career as a faction. But then when they split off, had three Hall of Fame careers single in their own right, every single one of them. I mean, Roman Reigns held the the undisputed world heavyweight partridge in a pear tree, whatever title for a record time that people hadn't seen someone hold a world title that long in 25, 30 years. Seth Rollins, I mean, his resume speaks for itself. Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose, reinventing himself, winning the WWE title, and then reinventing himself and going to AEW and holding the AEW title. It just, everything kind of clicked and it started from that. And I think that those are three of the most consistent and probably best wrestlers of the last decade or so. you had a match or a night where all three of them held the WWE title in one night.
Yeah, Money in the Bank.
Money in the Bank, when Dean Ambrose cashed in his title, his contract, and won the title. Everything was amazing about it, all the way up until Dean's final match when he reunited with the Shield to have his little final run. A little kind of part of me, I love Jon Moxley, but I miss Dean Ambrose. And Jon Moxley, I think, is just a little bit, takes himself a little too seriously. Dean Ambrose kind of had that funny kind of lunatic fringe edge to him, but it was kind of more like comedic. And I think that kind of fit him a lot better, because his personality, I think, covered up a lot of his in-ring stuff. Anyway, so yeah, the Shield debuting was huge for me. And you look across WWE, who would you say in your top 5 are Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns are right there these days. And in AEW, Jon Moxley's right up there. So that faction just took over wrestling for over a decade now.
It did. It certainly did. I had that on honorable mentions. I was thinking
absolutely.
it was going to come up. But listen, let me just run off a couple of wrestler ones. So, good friend of mine, Adonis Payne, was Ignite Wrestling champion. A couple of ones that I'm just going to do the different ones that we didn't have. He had Nexus written on the list, a group that could have done so much, but John Cena put end to quite quickly. Right. If you believe the stories, anyway. He said about Adam Cole's NXT debut, not the the Wyatt family. He just put here, he said a funny one. He said Jeff Hardy's AEW simply for the dance on the way down while his brother was being smashed to pieces. This is a good one. He said Hogan's WCW debut.
Yeah.
So he's done that. Let me check another one. So the former Turnbuckle champion, Smashing Mike, says in no order: Kurt Angle, TNA 2006. He did put Kane, Jericho. He actually put AJ Styles, but he said New Japan when he debuted in Japan in 2014. The Radicals on from Benoit, Saturn, and all those guys. And WCW, he said Goldberg's WCW. And one of the most interesting ones he's put on the list, Brian Pillman, ECW, 1995. For those of you that remember that, he did debut it wasn't long in ECW. It wasn't in ECW too long. I'll just run off a couple more. Good friend of mine. He's a wrestler. He's a pirate. Arthur Scarrow. He is a good friend of the show. And he said there's a couple on here that he put on there. One of them was Kevin Owens, actually, on the WWE. And the other one that he had that we didn't was the double debut of Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole.
Yep. Yeah. Hell yeah.
But those are all the ones. But guys, coming up on our show, as we finish off the end of this now, we're interviewing Kenzie and Kylie Page, the NWA sisters that are taking the world by storm. We've got a load of review shows. The interview with Mike Mondo will be out. So go and check that. It's a long interview. I didn't think it was going to go 2 hours, but we managed to get it to go 2 hours. A great guy, Mike Mondo. More stuff coming on but we are going to be at All In, so we're going to be quite busy the next couple of days. So if we are a bit quiet on socials, then that will be the reason why. But Jesse and Annie, tell us what we've got going on in your world on the Ringside Renaissance stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I will. Yeah, we have our weekly reviews coming out. We usually do a weekly WWE and AEW review. We're going to have our predictions for All In coming up. We may have something stirring up with some local talent that may come on and have kind of a little interview with us coming up here soon. And we're just hanging out and living the best life, man. Like this is bigger than anything we've ever expected or anything we ever kind of imagined this to be. So we're just rolling with the tide and seeing what becomes of it. Hanging out with Adam from Hitting the Turnbuckle, you know.
Yeah, and Adam, I just got a text message from MJF because All In's coming up, and he wanted to remind you and let Adam know that Andy and Jesse are actually from Plattsburgh, New York, and from 1812. It actually happened the Battle of 1812. In 1814, the United States defeated the British for the second time. Yeah, sent them home backpacking. That's what's going to happen with MJF to Will Ospreay at All In. But so, just a little fun fact for you.
Okay, well, I'm sure a Tiger Driver might put Thanks to that this weekend.
Okay.
Perhaps we'll wait and see. Always, what are your? Let everybody know where they can follow you, where they can find you on socials, etc.
Yeah, our YouTube is Ringside Renaissance. Our X is RR Wrestling Pod at RR Wrestling Pod. My personal is my Jesse Rass 64. You can just put in Pretty Deadly Jesse. I'm pretty sure no one else in the world goes by Pretty Deadly Jesse. I'm pretty sure that'll come up.
Yeah, and I'm Combat Jones with a K on X Twitter, and also we're on Facebook, Ringside Renaissance, and TikTok, Ringside Renaissance. So hit us up.
Hit them up, hit us up, HTT Buckle on X, Hitting the Turnbuckle Podcast, all other social media platforms. This has been the best top 10 debuts with Pretty Deadly Jesse, with Andrew Combat Jones from the Ringside Renaissance team, and I have been Adam Cousins from Team HTTB. Until next time, everybody, buckle down, stay safe, goodbye.